Role-playing game design requires a huge range of skills, but all too often game designers just discuss creating rules and settings. Um, I would like to explore all the skills necessary to create a role-playing game, and so instead of producing a really long video, I've decided to turn it into a series. I'll start with rules because every game has them. Even pretend play has them, as Lev Vygotsky points out. It's just they're not written down. So, rules in RPGs are examples of rhetoric. I'm using the academic definition of rhetoric, which is language meant to affect behavior. In this case, the desired behavior is follow these steps to create this sort of story. Most people explore the follow these steps, but what I'd like to explore is to create this story. Well, you can tell any story with any set of rules. The rules support certain types of stories better than others. For example, Dungeons and Dragons support stories about conflict. Attempt something, the DM chooses a target number, the player rolls and adds any bonuses and compares it to the target number. The comic book Mouse Guard is an example of a story that would be easily enough adapted to D&D's rules. Both feature heroic combat and travels through the wilderness. Just remove D&D's magic rules and you can run a similar story to the comic. And yes, I know that Mouse Guard already has its own game. It will be making an appearance in my next video. The manga series Aria, however, is about learning to be a gondolier in the city of Neo-Venezia. It is not about conflict. Instead, it's about learning about the city, how to live there, and how to be a gondolier. Each ride, adventure, or training exercise makes up an entire story. Later editions of Dungeons and Dragons, which I have since removed from my collection, tend to gloss over these sorts of details, calling them area knowledge, boating, and etiquette. The problem is that D&D jumps to resolution, treating every action as having a beginning and an ending rather than as a continuous process. That's pretty common, though not entirely a universal problem with role-playing games. There are ways to string together roles, such as hit points, but those don't work very well either. There are certainly better rules for telling stories like Area, like Golden Sky Stories, but none that I can think of do a particularly good job. But I don't want to get sidetracked into specific rules. The point I'm trying to make is that different rules tend to support different stories better than others. Explaining those rules, however, sometimes requires examples. Examples require completely different writing technique, one based in story rather than explanation. They aren't strictly necessary in a game. Although games that use them are much clearer, this change in rhetorical structure will make appearances again in future videos, so keep it in mind. So, you've decided to use examples in your game, but what examples do you write? There are three possibilities: the basic rules, the exceptions, and breaking the rules. Well, three basic examples. So, let's start with the basic rules and the game Do Pilgrims of the Flying Temple. This game uses a very non-standard system for running the game, okay? And thus, it manages to clarify that through examples. The rules are in the center, the examples are actually on both sides, and yes, there are different ways of setting up the page and different ways of showing the examples, but in general, they're always close to the rules that they show. And they're accompanied by artwork further reinforcing the examples. This actually makes it very useful because Go is so different from regular role-playing games that it actually is more difficult for hardcore players to play than new players, although the examples help out both people. Another way to use examples is to explain particularly tricky exceptions. This is more common with more complex games like Legend of the Five Rings, sometimes called L5R. In a previous version of the game, they had clan books. Most characters followed the rules of honor, but members of Clan Scorpion replaced this with loyalty. An example was used to demonstrate that difference. Some things were dishonorable, but fell under the rules of loyalty, and some things were disloyal, but also fell under the rules of honor. Finally, we come to something which I've never actually seen in a game thus far, but it may emerge as more games include Let's Plays, examples of rules being broken. Recently, there has been a trend towards players emphasizing the superiority of rules over the decisions of the game master. As much as I believe in using the proper rules from the game, I also believe that this can be taken too far. Perhaps that needs to be communicated with an example. Anyways, that's just what I've been thinking about lately. My next video will be about settings. Have a great day, and Dewey!